Oh, hello. In today's video, I want to share some of my thoughts on how you should go about teaching Kill Team to a new player. So, I'm actually a classroom teacher by trade. I teach computer science in a secondary school, so that's 11-year-olds all the way up to 16-year-olds, which also would tend to be the sort of age that people are going to start getting into wargaming. All right, you're not going to get many kids younger than 11 who are interested in it. So I know a little bit about how to break down concepts and get them across to people in that kind of age range, and I wondered to what extent I could map my professional skills onto the topic of Kill Team. So the first thing you're going to have to do is understand how much the person you're teaching already knows. Assess what's called their prior learning, and effectively, when it comes to Kill Team, dealing with three categories of people who are going to come, I'm interested in this game of Kill Team. I think by far and away the largest category you're going to get is you're going to get people who are 40k players or some other mass battle war game, whether that's Age of Sigmar, War Machine, or something else. Okay, and they're going to come in knowing about measuring, having ideas that could be wrong about line of sight, knowing about rolling dice, and if they're 40k players, they're going to have a little bit more of an idea about the lore. They're going to know, like, they're going to expect how powerful a bolt gun's going to be in terms of what they expect the outcome to be. They're going to know what models are going to be nebulously stronger and weaker. Okay. And then you've got a cohort of people who've come in from other skirmish games. It could be X-Wing, it could be Infinity, it could be War Machine, and they're going to come in with a different set of ideas. They're going to have played a lot of similar games to Kill Team. Maybe they're going to get wrong-footed by the ways in which Kill Team is different to their usual game of choice. But they're going to be far more used to the idea of just moving around one miniature. And then what you've got to ask yourself with both of those groups is how seriously did they take the game previously? If you get somebody who has never played Kill Team before, but they were a really competitive X-Wing or Infinity player, then they're going to be frustrated if you break it down too much and go really slowly. If they played those games but they only ever played them as a bit of fun over a kitchen table, then that's a different kettle of fish. Okay? And then finally, you got your total novices, kids, or mildly interested spouses, that kind of thing. People who've never really played a war game before, but for whatever reason they like to look at Kill Team, want to get involved. Maybe just because you're so enthusiastic about the game, or because they like the idea of just being able to pick up like 7 or 8 models and being able to really join in with the activity. So first thing to do is to try and think about the person you're teaching the game to, because your approach is going to differ depending on the kind of person that you've got sat in front of you. And then we're going to consider the resources that we've got available. So one of the things we're always doing in teaching is we try not to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of different people out there that have taught the same things that we're trying to teach in different ways, and often they've produced textbooks, worksheets, even full-on lesson plans and things. So generally speaking, for the purposes of teaching Kill Team, Games Workshop has given us 2 different routes now to entry, both of which I've reviewed on this channel, Fireteam and the Kill Team Recruit Edition. So Fireteam, just to recap, is one of Games Workshop's bookshelf games. It's a totally self-contained game, but it is very much branded to be part of the Kill Team universe. It's similar to Kill Team in a lot of ways, but it's also very different. It's a much shorter game. It's played on a hex grid, which means that line of sight works a lot like Blackstone Fortress. So it's missing kind of line of sight, which many people have said, line of sight is Kill Team. It lacks a lot of that strategic and tactical depth, but what it does do is it teaches the basic mechanics of cover and how you shoot and how the dice work and things like that. It doesn't use the close combat mechanics, but it does use the shooting mechanics. It does use APL, so there's bits there and terminology that are going to come across if you choose to start with Fireteam. And then we got the Kill Team Recruit Edition, which I reviewed recently in a video. The Recruit Edition is great if you've got the Orcs and the Krieg, and if the learner is interested in Orcs or Krieg. A lot of people, when they come into a war, not everybody, some people really just like games and treat games as puzzles to be solved. But a lot of people come into it, and the thing that they're interested in is they want to use models that are of a particular faction, look a particular way, or they can paint a particular colour. They may not want to use, gas mask, World War French guys, or sort of green football hooligans with big axes, but they might really like something else, you know. So it just depends what you've got in front of you as to whether that's appropriate. And the people who are not complete novices, people who've played war games before, are going to find the pace of having to play 4 games before they can try the full rules to be kind of slow going. Now, you don't need to use either of these approaches. If you're playing with somebody who is an older teenager or an adult or someone with experience, certainly, of playing other war games, you can just jump in and play Kill Team straight from the core book. But then there are things that you can do within that to dumb the game down a little bit to make them so there's a bit less to kind of think about when you get into the game. So the first thing is that you can play the open play scenario, which takes away tactical objectives. So the objectives game is a lot simpler, and there's only a few victory points available to you. Another thing people suggest is using compendium teams. Now this is really something I wanted to get into, kind of the meat of the little thought that was the genesis of this video. So there's this received wisdom that you want to try and use 2 compendium teams to play your first couple of games of Kill Team, like play intercessors versus another. Almost people say, oh yeah, just play 2 Space Marine teams once against the other, and I can understand why you do that. But there's this idea. Sometimes if you listen to people who coach miniature painting on the net, they'll say things like, you should teach new painters how to do wet blending, because if you don't do it until you've learned how to paint quite well, and if you leave blending as this thing on the shelf as though that's an advanced technique, you'll get to it. You have to kind of relearn a lot of the way in which you think about painting, right? If you look at the way I paint, I very rarely blend anything. So my miniatures always look a certain way because I have gone through. I think I'm a pretty good painter, but I learned to paint from Games Workshop resources. From learning as a kid in the store, from learning from their magazines, and learning from the stuff that Duncan and later Peachy put out on the YouTube. So I paint in a certain way. Whereas if you look at some of the stuff that Zimbab paints, he went to art college and he understands and has always used some of what wargamers would consider to be the advanced concepts of miniature painting. It's a similar thing, my discipline at school, I teach computer science, and I don't teach the kids object-oriented programming because they don't need to know it to pass the GCSE qualification. But I've had conversations with friends of mine who work in the industry who basically take the view that you're doing those kids a bit of a disservice, because getting really far and learning how to write quite complicated programs and then having to kind of go into a new paradigm and relearn how this new set of things works, you almost set yourself up there with a little barrier that you're going to have to climb over later on. Whereas if you just started off when you're first learning the skill with, oh, this is how it works, perhaps that person would then be in a better place. And I think maybe it's the same thing with Kill Team. Maybe you want to go in for your first proper game of Kill Team with 2 bespoke teams. Certainly, if you look at how Games Workshop have, one of their avenues for getting people into the game, the Recruit Edition from the starter set with Krieg and Commandos, they amp up the complexity of the actual figures, give them more to do as they're adding in all the other rules as well. And you have to understand that deciding arbitrarily, oh, we're all going to play with compendium teams to make it easy to understand, that's fine, but it's changing the game in much the same way as if you were to decide you're going to take away, the conceal order, right? You could play a game of Kill Team and never conceal, and you could learn all the other concepts and say, oh, we're going to add in concealing later, and people would think that was really weird, right? But you take away the bespoke teams and say, oh, we're just going to play compendium for our first 5 or 6 games, and that sounds straightforward to people. So I think maybe, the idea you should always start by learning on the compendium teams is kind of perhaps the wrong way about it. I don't know. But The short answer here is there is no short answer. This is one of those annoying videos where I've kind of talked for 8 or 9 minutes on a subject without really explaining anything or giving you anything useful that you can act on. But hopefully there's a couple of nuggets that you can take away. The person that you are teaching and understanding where they're coming from, what their prior learning is really important. And so there's not ever going to be a one-size-fits-all kind of way to teach the game to somebody, because you're going to have to teach it differently to someone who's played a lot of 40k. You're going to have to teach it differently to somebody who's played a lot of other skirmish games like X-Wing, and you're going to have to teach it differently to somebody who's a complete novice. If you're teaching, the experienced player having fun is not the outcome that you expect, right? And that's why it's quite borderline rude to turn up to a tournament and go, oh, it's like my first or second game, and then the other person has to. Most people are happy to do that, right? Most people are happy to teach a teaching game, but when you're teaching a teaching game, you need to try and find joy in the fact that you are trying to, you need to enjoy that process of teaching that other person. You're not going to derive the joy from the same, you're not going to derive the joy in the same way from the actual tactical backwards and forwards of the game. Of course you're not. You know, I've heard other people express and say, oh, you should always let the person that you're teaching win their first game. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. I think if you have the skill of letting them win their first game without them kind of realizing that you were letting them win, then that can be fine. I think sometimes if you really obviously let somebody win, that can feel quite belittling. So it varies a little bit. But what I would say is it's really important not to try and prioritize your own fun. If you're teaching, and you're not trying to get the same things out of the game you'd be trying to get from a casual game with your friend where you both got the same level of experience of the game. Zimbad, who often I play against, who actually works at school with me, has shared with me the maxim. I don't know if they still tell this to Games Workshop staff members, but he used to work in a Games Workshop store many years ago, and they used to say of their intro games, the most important thing is people are rolling dice and pushing plastic. So try not to erect barriers to people enjoying, especially if they're complete novices to wargaming. You know, try not to say, oh, actually, you couldn't do that, you need to go back here and do it this way, or, oh, actually, that's not quite right, you need to do this and this. Especially if you're teaching somebody that's a bit younger, especially if they've got no experience whatsoever, there is a value in just letting them get oriented with the idea of moving plastic miniatures across the tabletop and rolling the dice, even if what you end up playing is very dissimilar to Kill Team. That being said, I run a after-school club on once a week at school. We've mostly been playing Kill Team in the club, and it's quite hard now to move some of the kids off the simplified version of Kill Team that they've got used to playing, which doesn't include orders, and it doesn't include you know, tactical objectives, and it doesn't include, you know, half the problem is that we only have an hour to play. But so it is difficult, but try and let them have fun, because if no one's having fun, if you're throwing too much at them all at once, they're just never going to want to play with you ever again, because it's not going to be fun. It's got to be fun, and you've got to try and find that way of dripping in the complexity. Which is what makes the Recruits Edition stuff looks really good, but again, it's limited by you needing to have the specific models to play it in that way. Of course, if you're willing to put the time in, you could use what GW have done with the Recruits Edition as a template and adapt it to the people that you had in front of you. And that brings on to the last point, really, is you need to identify why the person in front of you is interested in playing Kill Team with you, right? If what they love is games, as in, you know, they view the mechanics of the game as a puzzle to solve, they'll want a lot of complicated rules interaction, right? And they'll probably be quite happy to use whatever miniatures you suggest they use. If they love the lore, then they're going to want to use their army, right? Now, this is a big problem when you come up, and when I was first teaching the game to friends of mine, people my age, really experienced wargamers, we're going to play Kill Team. All right, that's great. And I got one friend that sticks in my mind, and he's like, okay, I've got Space Marines and I've got Craftwell Eldar. And you could scarcely have mentioned two, you know, those are the two underpowered, most difficult to win with compendium teams going. And I'm like, okay, And I didn't say, no, you shouldn't play with those. Those are dumb. Go and buy something else. But I was thinking it pretty loud. Um, so if somebody is invested in a particular faction, for God's sake, let them play that faction. And if somebody really wants to play Space Marines, and it's not because you've said, oh, we're all going to pick from this compendium for our first game to make it easier, but if someone insists that they're going to play Space Marines, then don't come at them with something, don't come at them with your absolute A game and slaughter them, because it's not gonna go well. It's not gonna keep them coming back. It's not gonna make them want to play it any more than they already have. All right. And finally, this idea of people might really love the hobby. If someone loves the hobby, let them play with the models that they want to play with, even if they're not quite the right thing, right? Let them convert and let them see the opportunity and let them model on their equipment if that is what they want to do, and don't be like, oh, actually, by deciding that you're always going to give him that piece of equipment and putting it on the model there, you're setting yourself at a disadvantage. Just try and be flexible in your mindset when you're trying to teach someone a concept. If they've got a different a thing that's pulling them in and making them want to play that game with you, then nurture that rather than try never to tell somebody they're wrong. Try and always say, this is really good, and you're doing really, really, really good, really well. Got a really good grasp on that game. I really had to think about my moves for a couple of times there. Be even better if we did this or that or the other. But try and have that nurturing, nurturing aspect when you are teaching a game. I have encountered people who've said that new players should always win their first game, and I have also encountered people who believe that you should never pull your punches, and the only people should get absolutely ploughed into the ground, and then when they finally come back and beat you, they'll know that's like that they've really done something. I think both of those mentalities are flawed. It has to be nurturing. It has to be something where you're providing enough challenge so that somebody feels like they're having a good time and they're kind of stretching, but at the same time not so much challenge that it's overwhelming and feels pointless, and we're going to go back and play PlayStation or 40k or something else that we already know how to do, right? Okay, good. Well, I seem to have rambled for nearly 20 minutes on the subject of how you would teach someone to play a game of Kill Team. Just a few other channel type things. So I'm in the middle of moving house at the moment. My flat is like the final scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark. There are boxes everywhere. I'm going to try and stick to my upload schedule and get a video up. 3 times a week, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, every week. I'm going to try and give. If I miss one, though, that's the reason why. So please do not panic. Please do leave me a comment and let me know what you thought about that. It was a bit rambly. I'm really tired. Hopefully that didn't come through too much. So please do leave me a comment. If you like the video, give it a like. And if you've not yet subscribed to the channel and you fancy subscribing, then that actually really does help me out more than just about anything else at this point. So thank you for that. Cheerio, everybody. I hope you have a really nice day. Bye now.